dilemma between the custody rules and your role as a social worker?
I recently had one where I was like, I don't know if I'm going to get fired by Monday, but hey, I had to do what I had to do. It ended up seeing like 30 to 35 people a day. It's like crisis calls on the spot, trying to put out the fires. Just remember, we're here for the patient, not the crime.
Welcome to the Social Work HQ podcast, where we talk honestly about what social work jobs are actually like. I'm Mandy Wilcox. I'm an ER social worker, LCSW. I'm here to help you choose the right role without guessing. Each episode, I interview social workers from different roles and settings to talk about their real day-to-day work, pay, burnout, and career paths, so that you can make informed decisions on what's going to be the best fit for you. Let's get into today's episode. Tell us a little bit about your education in the social work field and kind of what led you to the field of social work.
An intense answer. So I do have my bachelor's and my master's in social work. I went to Cal State Long Beach. It was always my passion. I grew up in a low-income community, and the only university that would reach out to the elementary and middle schools was Long Beach. So that's how I, from fourth grade, knew that's where I want to go.
Mm-hmm.
I reached through the social work or went through social work field. I'm a daughter of immigrants, first generation. So I did a lot of advocating from like the moment I learned to read and write to, today, for not just my parents, but family members. I was like their translator, the person advocating for them, asking questions, filling out paperwork, learning how to like pay bills or send bills on through the bank and online. So being the advocate in the family and having to defend and support my parents a lot growing up was what got me to this field. Everyone, once they got to know me in the field, was like, you've always, since we remember, this is who you've been. So it's a field that I love. I always say I don't go to work. I go have fun in my field.
Mm-hmm. That's amazing. Where did you guys move from? Where did your parents come from?
My parents immigrated from Mexico.
Okay.
So Mexico City. My dad immigrated when he was 16. My dad went back, married my mom, and then came here. So the journey was tough. They didn't have anyone here, right? It was just them two young kids, language barrier. So I saw a lot of the struggles they dealt with people making fun of them for not knowing the language, or just, making comments of like, oh, typical Mexicans,
Mm-hmm.
So that fueled me to like, I'm going to help you guys and we're going to be okay.
Yeah. It sounds like, it just came so naturally for you to go into the social work field because, like you said, you were already kind of doing all of those things beforehand as you grew up.
Yes.
Did you take any gaps in between getting your bachelor's and master's in social work, or did you work in between those degrees or anything like that?
So I started working. So if I tell you my journey, started wanting to be a teacher, went and did some teaching, did not enjoy it, loved working with kids, but I just did not embrace the education department. I went back to teach at the school district I went to and saw a lot of unfairness going on in terms of what the kids were getting exposed to. There was so much more that people could be doing that wasn't getting done. And that really ruffled my feathers, where I was like, I can either step away from the field or stay in the field and like forever fight the system type of thing to do better. So then again, went back to work for an agency that provides services for speech. So I work with a lot of speech pathologists, audiologists, occupational therapists. I did that for 9 years, and I started off as reception, right? There I had my little dose of social work where I was advocating for the parents, getting them their insurance coverage, right? I learned a lot about billing, scheduling, interpreting for the Spanish-speaking community. I learned so much about how to work with the education department in different counties of Southern California and just advocating for those parents until one day my boss was like, so what's your deal? Like, you're good at what you do. You've learned everything here. There's no more room for you to grow. Are you going to go back to school and become a speech pathologist? Because that's who I work with. And I said, absolutely not. There's no way. Not my thing. Like, I can help you guys and I admire your work, but it's just not my thing. So it took me 9 years to go back to school. I applied to Long Beach. I'm not sure if you're familiar, but they're very competitive. It's very hard to get in. I did not have my hopes up. I just applied to different universities. And when they said yes, I was like, all right, this is it. Went and did undergrad, loved it. The professors were amazing, very supportive, because I was also working full-time, going to school full-time, doing my internship. So I was burned out and they supported me as best as they can. which is not expected, right? I just knew I had to do what I had to do if I really wanted it. But they went out of their way to support me, and that meant the world to me. A lot of them would ask me, why are you working? Half of these students are not working. And I said, well, I don't qualify for financial aid because I'm working. My parents are working. I was already, I think, 23 at the time. So I told them I have to work if I really want to finish my degree. So I did. Went to applied for grad school right after. And I finished in 2015 to 2019. But it did take me the good 9 years to say, what the heck do I want to do in my life?
Mm-hmm. That's
Because
okay.
I was enjoying my work, right? I was still helping people, just not on a professional level.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and now you're in I'm forgetting the word. What?
Now I'm in forensics.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Now you're in that area. So what kind of led you to that outside of once you graduated with your master's degree in social work, kind of what was your job progression from there?
So growing up, like I said, low income community, a lot of the people I went to school with either became part of corrections. So they were either in prison, using drugs, or passing away. Right.
Mm-hmm.
I had multiple counselors tell me, your kind never finish, or I don't even know why. I had one person tell me, I don't know why I'm wasting my time with you. Your kind never, they always start but don't finish their careers. So it was stuff like that motivated me to work with forensics, which is the adults that are currently in custody. Seeing my people I grew up with just not having any faith in themselves or believing that was it for them, right? Mm-hmm. So having the opportunity to go back to school, I said, well, why not give back to my people, right?
Yeah.
I worked with children as a social worker. I loved it. But you see so many things. I was like, oh, if I want to have kids in the future, this is not it for me. I remember when I was in grad school, everybody would ask, what do you want to do? They didn't have internships for corrections. So I did school and medical social work, which I loved. Mm-hmm. But I still I want to do forensics. So I applied, never thinking they would call me, but they did. Now I'm here. I'm on my 6th year. And like I said, I don't wake up and say I'm going to work. I'm generally having fun in my field. I love it. And I don't think I'd change it.
That's amazing. I can't imagine. I always try to be very cognizant of my privilege. I am a white woman, and I get frustrated for you as you were talking about how people would tell you that, oh, you're not going to graduate, or, I don't think you're going to finish school, or whatever it is. That is to me sounds like a form of racism, and so frustrating, I would imagine, for you to hear that constantly. And I can see why it would definitely be a motivator for you to go and support other people who have been told that their whole lives and help them gain some self-confidence that maybe they've never had before.
Yes, it's definitely a motivator, right? I could have used it for a positive or a negative. Mm-hmm. My parents always raised me with the mentality of that defines who they are, right? But we raised you better. You just show them that you're better.
Yeah.
It took everything in me. Don't get me wrong. There were days where I just would laugh jokingly and say, I'm going to catch a case today. But, it's because it took everything in me to keep myself professional and respectful, which was what was ingrained in me at home. But now coming back to this environment and seeing people and telling them, I could have been you, right? But someone somewhere decided to say, hey, let's open a couple of doors and see where you can go from there. So that's why I tell people, you just haven't opened the doors that you have, in your way. You keep opening that same door. What if we open a different door? Where would we end up? You are worth everything and anything positive that can come your way. And I've seen people leave custody and they'll still call my office. I'm like, you're not in custody anymore. Why are you calling me? And they're like, well, you're the one person that heard me. You're the one person that believed in me or empowered me. Or sometimes they'll, my Spanish speaking population, they're like, well, I can't do much because I don't speak English. I'm like, well, there's classes. Let's learn the basics. Nothing can stop you. The only person in the way of your success is you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That must be so rewarding, I would imagine.
It absolutely is. My family members tell me you're not in a field where you're going to make money. I go, but those phone calls, those thank you cards or those message slips requesting me are more than enough for me.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And I was always told that going into social work as well, is you're going into the field of social work, you're not going to make any money, which I think there are definitely areas of social work where you can make some decent money. If you're willing to share just general numbers, nothing specific, kind of what your pay range has looked like from a new grad to where you are now.
It's definitely gotten better. I'm still in the course of getting licensed, so I'm still, have some room for growth in terms of finances. But I mean, on a range, I'd say right now we're looking at anything from like 80 to 150, depending on where you want to go, right? There's always room for growth. I'm also what my dad refers to as a hustler, right? I've had 2, 3 jobs at the same time. Um, but at the end of the day, like I said, it's not about the money, right? It's very rewarding. Everything I've done in the field. So like my side jobs have been working for like people getting out of federal prison. So reentry, same population, different environment. So it's been great, a great learning experience for me, hearing them because they're coming into our custody and we're helping them with the resources we have here, right? But now they're going into the community, which is the other job where it's like, well, the struggle is real, right? Because here everything's handed to them and provided. Where there they have to do a little bit more of the legwork, right? And it's easy for us to say, well, you just go apply for Medi-Cal, go apply for social services. And then it's like, well, it takes the bus ride, it takes money, it takes time, it takes the right paperwork, the appointments. So it's a lot, but it's very educating to see, you are helping someone that nobody else took a moment to hear or guide.
Yeah. So what would you say kind of an average day looks like for you in your role?
Every morning, of course, our coffee, right? We got to get it going. We have a list. I worked in different parts of the jail because I also like to just throw myself wherever, especially if I don't think I'm going to like it. When I was working outpatient in the jails, it looked anything from 10 to 15 individuals. The goal or like the magic number is 10 for everyone. Now, if we're being realistic, you and I know there's always a list, right? So I would keep my boundaries at 15 and then any other emergency call that we could potentially get, right? Because people get bad news while they're in custody, court went wrong or a breakup, something goes on. Those are the extras, right? So realistically, we'd end up seeing like 30 to 35 people a day. Mm-hmm. Keeping in mind, it's not like a full-blown assessment, right? It's like crisis calls on the spot, trying to, put out the fires based on whatever comes your day. So outpatient, I would see about that many, as well as groups. The groups, I primarily work with females in custody. So we would do a lot of self-love, women empowerment, healthy communication. So between my groups and individuals, I'd say it sounds intense, but it's not. I think by like 11, 12, I'd sit down and just work my notes till the end of the day. Mm-hmm. I learned the hard way, right? You learn to work smarter, not harder with time. Initially, I would go see someone, come to a note, go see someone. Now it's like, okay, these are my notes of who I need to see. This is how I'm going to, get my day going. Mm-hmm. Now I'm in the psych unit. So the psych unit is a little bit different, right? We have to see every single person there. We have to advocate because a lot of them are not mentally stable. And we want to make sure they still get all their rights protected and respected, not just at court, but in custody as well. So it runs a little different where we see less people, anything from 10 to 16, but the cases are intense, way more intense than outpatient. Mm-hmm. We work hand in hand with psychiatrists, nurses, doctors, law enforcement. So being in the social work side of custody is a little different because you have to respect custody, right? Because we're in their house. So understanding their safety concerns, but continue to advocate, not letting the concerns or the laws get in the way of what's right is right and what's wrong is wrong. Mm-hmm.
Are you able to give like an example of kind of what that might look like, where there's maybe a little bit of a dilemma between the custody rules and maybe your role as a social worker?
I recently had one where I was like, I don't know if I'm going to get fired by Monday, but hey, I had to do what I had to do. I had a client who needed he had a medical situation going on. As social work in custody, our goal is to like get them going for the community, right? They don't want to be held in custody for no reason. However, this patient I knew is not mentally stable to continue on to take care of his medical situation. So I had to advocate through public defenders, through district attorney and say like, hey, how bad would it be if I request for him to stay to get his medical needs here in custody to avoid waiting for Medi-Cal to be approved, PCP to be, identified, appointment, all that good stuff. It could have taken anything from 3 to 6 months when we already had everything in place in custody, right? Mm-hmm. So I did get a lot of pushback. Like, we never hear social workers asking to keep a person in custody. Like, you're crazy. Then I did my best to advocate. Like, listen, let's be real. If he gets out, none of this is going to happen, right? And if we are trying to be humane and really care, like this is the right thing to do, I asked my patient, and he was very like, well, I don't care, right? Again, he's in the psych unit. Couldn't really tell you what is best for him or what he thought was best for him. So I built my case. It was granted, right? He had surgery. Now, where I say I could have gotten in trouble is I did it on the spot. I didn't think to consult with my boss. I didn't think to consult with anybody else. I just did it. Later, I did disclose to my boss, like, hey, I'm sorry, this is what I did. If you ask me if I do it again, I'd probably do it again. And she laughed and she said, well, you did the right thing, right? Your clients now, they've got their surgery, they're taken care of and ready for community when the time comes. Everybody was pushing back against that on the law enforcement side because it's like, well, they had a sentence and it's over. But as you know, a lot of our population is unhoused. So what is the reality of them really getting the support they need?
Yeah. Yeah, so. I don't know a lot. I haven't worked in corrections, but it does seem like what I've learned is that a lot of people, they enter back into the community and they just fall through the cracks because they don't have the support and resources that they need set up before they leave the correction system.
Yeah. And it's become very normal, right? Like you come in, you come out. And to me, it's like, well, I love to sit with them and say, what's bringing you back? Oh, I don't have a house. Why don't we have a house? And we forget about the basics, right? Like we can't sit here and do therapy if they don't have food, shelter, clothing, right? So I always tell them, like, we're working as a pyramid. We're at the bottom. What do we need to survive? So we connect them with those programs. And I think the other hard part is, meeting the patient where they're at. Sometimes they're not ready, right? But I've been blessed to see some that initially didn't take the help. And now 6 years later, they're like, I'm ready, Cindy. I've already been there, done that. I don't know how long I can do this. I'm ready now.
Yeah. As social workers, the number one thing that I think all of us live by is you can't work harder than the client works, and you can't help them if they're not quite ready to help themselves.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that's the hardest thing for me.
Yes.
So I get right there.
Yes, and you can see their potential and you want the best for them, but you have to wait until they're ready to accept it.
Yes.
Yeah. I think for a lot of new grads in social work, oftentimes they can be a little bit intimidated by the correction system and forensics. What advice would you give them or give to your younger self if you had just graduated from school for social work and were thinking about forensics or corrections?
My advice would be staying true to myself. We work against many, many monster systems, right? So regardless of how it's beautifully painted or written in policies and different, what we like to call MOUs, like different policies within the agencies, being true to yourself. Like, this is what I stand for. This is why I'm here. Because it's very easy to, derail from your position in, like, for instance, in hearing corrections. It's very easy for me to be like, well, yeah, they're charged with this. Let's not, no, I'm not here to judge you. I'm here to support you for the human that you are, not for whatever crime you committed, right? So I think that is the main thing I would tell my younger self and anyone who's interested in corrections. Just remember, we're here for the patient, not the crime.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think at the end of the day, someone can commit crimes and make mistakes, but they are still human. At the end of the day, they probably still want someone to listen to them. They probably still wouldn't mind a hug, or like the most basic human things that I think a lot of people forget when it comes to people in the correction system.
Yes. And there's different levels of crime, right? There's some that socially were not accepted whatsoever. And I think that's where that comes from, where a lot of law enforcement and, the attorneys, families, and other people in custody will tell you, like, how dare you help that person? And I always have to remind them, remember, I'm not wearing green, right? I'm not law enforcement. I'm not the judge. I'm but I'm mental health. That's what I'm here for. And I've had a lot of people tell me, like, thank you, Cindy. Before you, everyone just saw me for my charge. And so I tell them, like, that's the attorney's job. That's the judge's job. I'm here to support you. We got to get through the day. Yeah. And how am I going to be able to help you get through that day?
Do you find that with the population that you work with, are they pretty open to speaking with you and being open with you during assessments and discussions, or do you find that your population that you work with are generally pretty closed off to begin with?
Generally very closed off, right? So when I was working with the females, we had the variety of females in their background. Your ones that were very gang involved refused 100%, like, I don't need mental health. So then I started kind of reaching out in a different perspective with my groups, right? You're not receiving therapy. I'm simply trying to teach something that you could potentially benefit from. You decide if you show up or not. I'll be here. The first couple of months, my groups were like empty, but I still showed up, and everybody would tell me like, you're wasting your time. And I'm like, someone's going to show up one day, right? Now I get slips like, hey, when are you doing this group? When are you doing that group? And they don't see it as mental health. You'd be damned if you say they're going to a mental health group, right? It's like, which is running groups for girls. That's what I call my girl group. So being able to reach out in that aspect and getting creative to still provide the mental health services that are not mental health was big for me here. Because, I mean, effective communication or self-love was something that we talk about it being common sense or just nature to us. And it's like a lot of them didn't know, right? Or they assumed, yeah, I love myself, but it's like, do you really, right? Do you even know what it means? What does it look like, right? Because what we're told could be very different from what we want. So it's been good.
Yeah. And you said it's been 6 years since you've been in the correction system?
Yes.
What do you think, if there was one thing from your experience, that everything that you've learned from the individuals that you've worked with, is there any one thing that you think would help prevent people from entering into the correction systems, whether that be specific family supports, if there's theory that rising divorce rates or not providing supportive environments for children? Have you seen any patterns in the individuals that you work with that maybe would help us recognize where we can improve and help keep people out of those correction systems to begin with?
Yeah, so it's, again, in the 6 years, I could divide it into two. Initially, when I started working here, there was a lot of family dynamics that were not the healthiest, right? So I'd have a lot of people tell me like, no, I don't have a family. When I get out, I'm out by myself. And I used to tell myself like, I know I don't have the healthiest family environment, right? But I do know that I can count on my family and that there is love there. And so I would ask them like, could there be potentially love, but it's not the love that you need? And a lot of people tell me like, no, I have no one, right? So I want to say in that first part of being here, it was a lot of like lack of support from family and loved ones. Nowadays, I see a lot of substance use, right? And we all know there are different foundations for those behaviors, but there's a lot of like substance use that I feel like we could do better as a community, right? Not just before, but even after when they come in to custody, just giving them that, that leap of faith. You're worth it. You can do this. Where I understand every family is different and everyone presents different under the influence. But at the end of the day, like you said, all they need is someone to believe in them and support them, and remind them like you're worth the sobriety. You're worth that sober you, and you deserve better.
Yeah, that's wonderful. How do you feel like government systems or social systems affect your work as a social worker in the corrections field?
In many ways. We do a lot of referrals, right? So we'll get a big list during the summer of these are the many shelters that will have AC for people. And we'll give out the list. And sometimes I'm like, let me just call this list just to make sure every single pamphlet I'm handing out, people know, or it's works. Sometimes I call and only like 80% of them are still open, right? So to me, it's like false advertisement, right? Now I'm giving everyone this list and not everything is accurate. Yeah. But that's what people promote in the community. We get a hold of it. There's also a lot of like, hey, we have this great program, but we're only going to take 18. Well, I have 300 people getting out, right? And there is a lot of resources out there. I just feel like as a community and as providers, we could do better, And I know sometimes it just becomes overwhelming, but we could do better.
Yeah. I think, there's a level of burnout as well that goes into that. What do you see in regards to burnout in your area of social work?
People start getting grumpy, right? I know for me, once I check myself very often where it's like, if I'm not being this person has already been told off so many times and felt unwelcomed. So if I start, acting that way, got to check myself, right? It's time for me to either take a mental health day or a couple of days off. I have to take a step back. And I think that's what happens a lot in our field, where it's like, well, I already saw 50 people, but the 40 want a referral. And it's like, well, we got to figure it out, right? So that we're still present for our patients and not just dismissive, because that's what everybody else is already doing.
Yeah.
And I am told a lot, you do too much, Sandy. You do way too much. You take on a lot. But to me, it's like, if I can get one person to come back and say, hey, I stopped going to jail because of that referral you did, that's all I need.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think it depends on your personal tolerance of what you can handle. Maybe you'll take on more that someone else might not be able to handle, and that's totally fair. Everyone has their different levels of tolerance of the work and dedication or investment, I guess you could say, that they want to put in towards their work. And self-care, we're taught so much about self-care in school, but none of us really know what that looks like until we get into the field and we learn what self-care looks like for us individually, because it is going to look different for every person. What kind of self-care is best for you?
So I've been told my self-care is not really self-care, but I love cleaning. So to me, reorganizing, cleaning, getting rid of junk. People say, get out the way, Sandy's cleaning. She might throw you out too. But that just gives me a sense of control, right? So when I'm feeling burnout, I feel like things are just getting out of hand. So if I start cleaning or organizing, it's my bringing myself back. I could tell you I love going on trips, but even on trips, I'm just thinking of what can I do next? I'm just on the go the majority of the time. It's very hard for me to sit there and just relax, So that's why I always say my self-care is cleaning. People always argue with me and say that's not self-care, but I'm like, it works for me.
Yeah, that's fair. If it works for you, then that's all that matters. They can find something that works for them. What do you think makes someone successful in your role or in the correction system as a social worker?
Again, just sticking true to yourself and reminding yourself why you're here.
What percentage of your role would you say is like direct client facing and documentation or admin type work?
I'd say it's 50-50.
Okay.
There's a lot of restrictions in custody, right? So I do my best to be present and be more clinical with the restrictions that I have. If I had less restrictions, I would make it 80-20, right? So because I have to work with the environment I'm in, I'd say 50-50.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Is there one specific skill that you feel like would really aid a social worker in your role?
One specific skill. I think just being boundaries, firm boundaries. Mm-hmm. Being in custody, right? Because you get to see people at their lowest, right? So your patients are either, this is it, I'm pissed off at the world, or I'm feeling hopeless. So keeping your boundaries and just, again, this is my role. This is how I empower you and support you, as well as having boundaries with law enforcement, with our medical staff. And I think that's the best skill to have as a social worker in this field, in any field in general.
Yeah. And I think I would imagine, and maybe you correct me if I'm wrong, it maybe took you some time being in that role before you learned kind of where are these boundaries, or like what do the boundaries look like for me? Because we learn about boundaries in school and how to have boundaries with clients, but it's always going to look different in every job that we have and with the clients that we work with.
Yeah, so it did take some time, because initially I just wanted to go, help everybody and just keep everybody happy, right? But then I learned, like, no, if I'm going to stick to my role and be true to myself and why I'm here, my purpose, it's going to upset people, right? Mm-hmm. And it's also okay, so long as I'm being respectful and communicating effectively, and like I said, sticking to what's right is right and what's wrong is wrong. Mm-hmm. And it's worked for me. I've had people that tell me, like, oh my gosh, Sandy, you don't budge. And it's like, we both have a job to do and we both need to get it done, and this is how it's going to get done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. Do you think that there's anything that this job has taught you that you didn't learn in school?
A lot. I think when it comes, because I have interns as well. I'm a preceptor for interns, and I always tell them, like, your books are great to read, but not one person is specifically defined in your book, right? Mm-hmm. So it's great, or maybe it was just me, I didn't take into account that everything I learned was going to be molded to whoever I was working, right? Which goes back to meet your patients where they're at, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I always tell my interns, like, just because it worked for one person, it's not going to work for the next, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have to genuinely show up and be where they're at.
Yeah.
And I tell them, bring in your tools and leave the ones you don't need behind, because that tool you're leaving behind might be for the next one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I think it was just maybe exposure that we didn't get as much.
Yeah. I think, internships are really great while you're in school to get a little bit of exposure, but definitely not enough that you would need to learn everything that you need to learn. And I think all of us, even, I'm about 6 years into the field after my MSW. You've been in the field 6 years. I think all of us would agree that we're always learning something. Social workers especially are always thrown new scenarios and new problems that they have to solve. And that requires us to always be learning new things and learning how to handle new problems.
Yeah, and I think I'm pretty sure there's much more, but policy affects us, right, in every environment that we're working. So that's one thing that I love to bring up to my interns, where it's like, when you graduate, it's one thing, give it 2-3 years, and now you got to either shift certain things or learn other things. Mm-hmm. And it's very important for you to not just dismiss them, because we're working with humans, right? We're not working with machines. We're not working with buildings. It's humans. So you have to make sure you show up and be the best clinician you can be for them.
Mm-hmm. And I think that brings up the idea that a lot of people argue that AI is going to take over all jobs. But I really think social work is kind of a job security nowadays, because we work with humans, and because we are humans and our clients need that human interaction. AI really won't ever be able to take over that, I think, which I never thought of when I was going through school, that would be something I needed to worry about, but it's definitely something I'm grateful for now.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I always say we're never not going to have a job.
Yes, yeah. And I think especially with all the social systems and programs that are out there, I mean, social workers are really at the core of so many different community programs and systems that without social workers, I think so many facets of our community would kind of collapse. And we're kind of the invisible glue that holds things together, because I don't think many people realize how involved social workers are throughout their community, but there are really a lot of different roles that social workers hold.
Absolutely. I mean, we see it in every multidisciplinary team, right? I feel like, not because I am a social worker, it may sound biased, but I feel like we're able to look at the different lens and understand it, right?
Yeah.
Versus other disciplines where sometimes it's just hard to understand, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just like, well, you may not understand me, but I'm understanding you, so now I know how to approach the situation.
Yeah. And I think if there's anyone who can kind of pull pieces of different perspectives all into one view, a social worker is definitely really good at that. And whether that be because of our clinical training, or maybe because a lot of us are used to doing kind of these psychosocial assessments where we're looking at every piece and aspect of a client's life and seeing how that affects them. And I think when we're in meetings, in interdisciplinary meetings, we have a broader perspective that we're able to bring to the team and say, well, what if we do this, it's going to affect the people this way, or if we do this, it's going to affect them this way, that other people might not recognize, because oftentimes we have a more broad perspective.
To think of others.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right? It's always about somebody else, not us.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So
what do you think is the most stressful part of your job?
Like I said earlier, when you know someone has the potential, you know how to help them, and they're just not ready. I think that has been a forever challenge for me. But it's also the best lesson I've learned. Challenging in the sense of, sometimes I'm like, this is all you need to do and you'll be okay, right? Or you just need to do one more court visit and you're off probation. Like, how hard is that? But understanding that there's much more. And sometimes there's people that tell me, I don't want the help. Stop wasting your time. I appreciate you showing up for me, but I don't want it. There's no motivation in me to be better. And I think that's hard, because I'm like, but I believe in you. You can do it. And it's like, well, I'm not interested. So learning to take a step back and just support as I can within the moment, within the initial needs at that time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's fair. That must be really frustrating, I'm sure, to want to help them, and they just don't want it. What do you think are common reasons that people would leave a position like yours?
Burnout and money.
Okay, that's fair.
Yeah, money takes us places, right? Um, like you said earlier, I feel like I do well when I have two, three jobs because I just do well. Um, and I want to say this goes back to me being a child and just supportive of everybody and anybody I could. So I do well under pressure. Not everybody does. So it could potentially bring them to burnout. And again, we need the money, right? Especially in today's world. Everything is just so expensive, and especially being in California.
Yeah.
The majority of us have 2, 3 jobs to survive, period. So it could lead to burnout, and money plays a big role, especially if you have a family.
Yeah, definitely. I think, every social work job is going to have different demands and different pay, but whether or not you have, a second person in your household that's bringing in income, or maybe you're a single parent or whatnot, it definitely can change your circumstances to where, you might really enjoy a specific job, but if it doesn't pay what you need it to, then you have to go find something else. What do you think is changing in the broad scheme of things for the social work field, or are there any specific changes that you would like to see in the social work field in the future years?
What I would like is more, I say, better use of resources or implementation of the resources. Also being realistic, right? And I'm coming from a corrections forensic standpoint, where it's like there's a lot of expectations placed on people that are barely surviving, right? And I love to take a step back and say, well, if I consider myself a stable person, right? Financially, emotionally, now we have someone who's not there quite yet, and we expect so much of them, right? So if we implement resources accordingly, we could potentially be doing way more than what we do now.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It's kind of that hierarchy of needs where if someone doesn't have those basic needs met, they're not going to be able to focus on anything above that at all. They need to be safe and secure in basic needs before they move on to other things.
Yeah.
For social work students graduating, is there any specific advice you would give them about the social work field in general?
Again, I sound like a broken record. Be true to yourself in this field. It's a beautiful field. I always say, no matter how many, if I had a different life, I'd still do it again. It's very rewarding. Not here for the money. We're here for what we do. And, like I said, a thank you, a phone call, anything like that, it's worth more than what your check can bring you, because we make a difference. I don't think the world acknowledges us as much as we should be acknowledged, but we do a lot. We make a difference. And there's been a lot of teams that are like, where's our social worker, right? And just being respectful to the human being population that we're working with, and remembering why we do what we do, which is to advocate and help empower humans.
Yes, that's great. And I think you get to do more of that in the corrections field, maybe than other areas of social work, I would guess. What do you think is the biggest misconception about your job?
I think, in general, when I tell people I'm a social worker, everybody immediately thinks CPS, right? And then it's always a negative. Oh, you must work with taking kids away. And it's like, okay, well, are we taking this? First of all, no, I don't work in that field. I go, but let's take a step back. There's a reason why certain things happen, right? Our priority is to make sure everyone's safe, or make sure everyone is where they need to be to survive and thrive in, whatever it comes their way in life. There's always that, well, don't bring in the social worker because they're going to bring problems, and it's like, I wish it was a little bit more of a positive connotation when they talked about our field.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, the basis of all social workers is we're doing things to help people. We're usually not ever doing anything to purposefully harm anybody, but because of the situations people may be in, we might be taking actions that to them seem pretty negative. But at the end of the day, all social work roles that I'm aware of are just there to help people live a happier and healthier life.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that you feel like that I haven't asked about that you want to share?
Coming from custody, I empower, I hope people can get a little grasp of what I've shared and get that curiosity to look into the forensic world. There is so much we can do, right? Not just as social work, but as a community, to not forget about people in custody, right? And to remember the human behind whatever crime was committed, like there is potential for change, right?
Mhm.
Some people could have just been wrong place, wrong time, right? And if we sit here and just judge or, avoid helping or empowering those humans, it's like, what are we getting from that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Let's be supportive, help one another, be empathetic. So coming from corrections, I always say, like, be the voice for the voiceless. There's a reason why, there's a need there.
Mm-hmm.
Could we change it to, in the future, potentially there's no more custody, there's no more prisons? The odds are very low, right? But if we continue to empower and use our resources accordingly, those numbers may drop, right? And there may be potential for us to be empowering everybody in the community and just having it be a better world, nicer world, more accepting, more loving than what we currently live in.
Yeah, I love that advice. You definitely sound like a very good social worker.
Thank you.
If this conversation was helpful, definitely leave a comment, leave a review. If you want to subscribe, that would be awesome. So helpful. You can also find free resources and career tools at the link below to help you explore your options and plan your next steps in the social work career. Finally, if you are a social worker and would like to share your experiences on the channel to help other social workers in their career, we would love to have you on. Thanks for listening. See you next time.